Hey everyone out there, how you doing? Welcome. I'm Tim Laskus, and you're listening to the Tim Laskus Show, episode 009. And today's awesome guest is Kristy Arnett. Kristy's a writer, a speaker, an emotional intelligence coach, and a professional risk taker. And what do I mean by that? She's been in the professional poker industry for over 10 years as a player and a reporter, and she shares some awesome stories of what it's like to go up against some of these guys at the table. She ain't intimidated. And she's also host and creator of What the F Am I Doing With My Life? I love that title. She's also writing a book with that. And I want to repeat that again. What the F am I doing with my life? So stay tuned and you're going to hear more of what exactly this is all about.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests, entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Welcome everyone to the Tim Laskus Show. I'm very honored to have Kristy Arnett as my guest today. Kristy, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here with you.
For sure. You know, we were talking a little bit about poker and Texas Hold'em. I think the interviewers would be inspired to hear your story and your connection to the poker industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been over a decade since I've been in the poker industry, and I started out like many of the young online poker players that you see on TV, those young guys. I started playing online and with, some people, some of the boy athletes that I was friends with in college, and made the move out from the Midwest to Las Vegas to pursue a reporting career in the industry, because that's what I went to college for. And, I really love the game. I love the competitive aspect. I love the psychological aspect. And over the years of interviewing the best poker players in the world, I played all the while. So many times I'd be doing interviews and asking the questions that I wanted to know, which was not only helpful for my viewers, but helpful for me. And about 3 years ago, I made the jump to playing professionally. So it's been a roller coaster, but poker is a mirror for life in so many ways. And what I've committed myself to doing is using poker to become a better person. And now as I branch out, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, as I branch out as an entrepreneur, I'm using it to fund my business. So I love having purpose as a poker player now. It's not just about taking money from people.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, I just had a quick question about your style of poker. Are you more of a math person when it comes to poker, or more psychology based, reading that person, or are you just kind of going through the math about your odds and whether you should, what your next step should be?
Well, because I didn't play online for an extended period of time, that's not really my base. So usually what you hear people say is online players, they come from this mathematical game theory optimal perspective and foundation. And then they use that, and if they get experience playing live poker, then they go more with the psychology and reads, which you're not really able to use online. There are some things you can do online, but as a player who has my foundation as a live player and much, much more experience live, I lean on most of my live reads, but there's still poker hand reading. That's the base for any poker player. But I do use some math, so it's hard to say. I lean and rely on my live skills, which is a lot of psychology, understanding how people perceive me, and game flow, all of those things. But it's hard to say just one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And is it tough as a woman to break into the professional poker players kind of club? Are they intimidating? Are these guys rude, and do they test you all the time because you're a woman?
Well, I wouldn't say it's harder to break in because of the fact that women can just sit down and play, and online you can't tell, obviously, but live, you're in already, right? You can enter any tournament. However, you are right in the fact that there are some things that make it a little bit more difficult at the table, just because there are, like, 4 times as many men playing the game as women.
Hmm.
And I think it's the same sort of things that would hold any woman back in a male dominated industry, but they're all interpretations. So, what I'm saying is, sure, there may be men who are hitting on you at the poker table, or
Hmm.
saying silly things like, "Why don't you smile?" I'm like, are you telling any other guys to smile at the table? I don't want to smile. Like, this is my
Right.
poker face, like, whatever.
Uh-huh.
So, but as a woman, there's absolutely nothing that can't be overcome, and it's our own responsibility to handle these triggers in a responsible way so that we can play optimally.
Right. Well, it doesn't sound like that you're easily intimidated, and I'm sure you don't put up with any BS. And out of all the poker players that you've kind of come up against, that you've faced, who's the most intimidating person? Either intimidating or most difficult to read, or just tough to play against.
I would say that, well, I mean, of all the people I've ever seen, Phil Ivey, I've never gotten to personally play with him, but as a
Mhm.
reporter and being around his tables when he's playing, he is constantly looking for an edge on you, whether that's outside of the poker player, or outside of the table, or at the table. I mean, he's always looking for an edge to either intimidate you, or, you know, a little comment to bring you down. He's just incredibly sneaky and conniving, and that's what makes him so good. But also, that's what makes pretty much everyone around him, even other pros, kind of cower in his space.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I agree. Just watching him on television makes me nervous. So I would never want to be
Right?
in that spot going up against him. Well, that's wonderful. And I could probably go on all day talking about poker, but let's go into your area of expertise professionally. Tell the listeners what you're currently working on.
So I'm a fellow podcaster, and my area of expertise is emotional intelligence and personal development. About 3 years ago, I was in a position where I was asking myself, what the F am I doing with my life? I was playing poker professionally. It wasn't fulfilling. I had some very harsh feedback from my world, which I think many times we are given feedback, and that's part of emotional intelligence. What
Hmm.
is the outside world telling us? What are our results telling us? And at that moment 3 years ago, not happy in my job, and I was on the brink of divorce with my husband, who I'd been with for 8 years. And my personal relationships, including my family, were very strained. And I just took a look, and I'm like, man, this isn't what I want to create with my life. Sure, I was at the height of my career professionally and doing really well, but what really matters when you have success and there's nobody to share it with. So at that moment, I really decided that I was going to take responsibility and move forward with my life. And my husband and I, we went through a an emotional intelligence leadership course, which from the outside, it sounds like, oh, you would go there for business, you would go there for moving forward as a leader, maybe as a manager. But really, what emotional intelligence is the ability to identify and, just really take control and responsibility for our own emotions, and also identify those with others. So empathy and sustained motivation, our ability to inspire and lead. And this really is the base for strong relationships. And as you know, as an entrepreneur, everything in business is relationships. So what I really got to learn in this course was how to be successful in all domains of my life. My marriage, we healed our marriage. It's now to a place that I could have never imagined. We're looking to have kids and stronger, more trustworthy, more passionate and intimate than ever. And my family relationships healed. I learned how to form and build relationships in business. And now what I'm doing is I am now a certified emotional intelligence coach. I
Excellent.
Yeah, I've launched my own podcast since it was inspired by this moment of what the F am I doing with my life? That's what I
Love
called
that name.
Yeah, that's what I called my podcast. And I'm sure people who are listening may resonate. Oh man, I've had lots of those what the F moments. And either we use those moments as momentum to shift and change the trajectory of our lives, or we get caught up in them and we kind of spiral down. But it's up to us to decide what we do with those moments. And they can be and I'm going to actually probably talk about another WTF moment in business. But anyway, so that's what I'm doing now. I'm currently writing a book called What the F Am I Doing with My Life? And
Love
which,
it.
yeah, which is aimed to shift people's paradigms and perspectives to live the best life they can, to achieve their dreams. And I'm also going to be speaking and having online courses. So I'm really at the beginning stages of my entrepreneurial adventures, but loving every step of it.
Well, that's awesome. And I'd watched you. You have a number of YouTube videos out there, and I watched one that was about who are you when the chips are down, and
Hmm.
that has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, because the real person will shine, and it is so important to not let your emotions control your behavior and your actions and decision making, and being able to learn to keep that in check. It's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And how to use your stress as fuel. Because as an entrepreneur, you're going to absolutely have setbacks. And how much time are you going to spend in this feeling sorry or whatever it is? Or can we use it as a learning and just use it as a launch pad? So, absolutely.
Yeah, and I tell people, when times get tough and you get down, and you talked about that fuel, that fuel of stress, that can either motivate you or it can burn you down. And a lot of people will get burned down by that fuel of stress. And so that doesn't have to be. And it really is a need for people to kind of rewire how they think, how they process situations, and just use that as energy to be able to fuel their flame and their entrepreneurial spirit, pick themselves up and go, tackle something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have a little bit of a story about this if you would like me to
Yeah,
share
go
it.
ahead. Sure.
So, while I was playing poker professionally and thinking about the next thing I wanted to do, I wasn't really sure. I had this idea about entrepreneurs that they had to be these unique humans and you were born that way, kind of like Gary Vaynerchuk. Like I always thought
Hmm.
that the entrepreneur was this guy or girl who was selling lollipops at in middle school for a profit. Like there were special people and they weren't me. I never had that in me. I've never had those ideas like, oh, I'm going to start this product. It just didn't. So I always had this limiting belief about me not being an entrepreneur. And one day, this guy contacted me on Twitter and he said he was building a company which was going to build an app called Mentor, which was an on demand platform to connect mentors with people. And as I was pursuing my own EQ coaching certification, I was like, wow, this is a great idea. This is amazing. If I could reach people on demand and when someone needed me, it would just come as a notification on my phone and I could connect with them, I thought, great idea. So I contacted him via phone. I read his business plan, his executive summary, and I thought it was great. So I got really excited And speaking to him on the phone, he's like, oh, I followed you for years. I think you're great. You show up as a leader. You really made me feel good. And long story short, what ended up happening is I went into business with him. And I was going to be a co-founder of this company. And I decided after, some convincing and some period of time that I was going to invest $10,000 of my own money. And as I was asking questions with my, people I trusted, including my husband's parents, they also decided to invest $10,000. And this all happened very quickly because he was very persuasive in that we're going to actually close the seed round soon. We're going to raise this amount of money, I don't know, I think it was like 300,000 very quickly if you want to get in. So we invested $20,000. I came on, and over a period of a month and a half, actually getting to know him, pretty much immediately I had this gut feeling that started growing and growing, like, oh my goodness, this guy, he is not who would ever be able to run a multi-million-dollar company. Like, we're in trouble. And so finally I uncovered that the money was gone. He personally took them as paychecks, and that all the other investor money that he said was coming in, that was in already, was not there. So it was one of the most humiliating, embarrassing, awful failures that I had ever had. And to go to my family and say, I am so sorry, I made a mistake, the money's gone. He essentially, I'm careful to use this word, but it was a scam. So it was a very difficult time. But what I took from that was I learned an incredible amount about investing, the right questions to ask, the rules that I have now about who I will ever go into business with. And part of that is how do they themselves experience adversity. And I had no idea how he would do that until I started working with him. So those are, if you're talking about questions or how-tos, one that is, if you're ever going to go into business with someone to be business partners, you need to, one, enjoy the time you spend around them. Two, how do they handle adversity? Three, do they have skin in the game themselves? Are they invested either financially or, do they have a lot on the line? Is the success of their family on the line for this if they don't have money, or what are they contributing? And also, would you go to bat for this person, when the chips are down? So all of these questions, and you've got to also take things to a lawyer, spend the extra money to have them look at the papers and advise you, because if you're not an expert, find experts, so that's what I would tell listeners. And for me, the thing that I learned, which I will always take away and be able to use, and what I'm doing now, is that it kindled my entrepreneurial spirit. When I was in business and when I got to talk to other people, I got to meet other experienced pros in the tech industry and hold my own, what I really got to know is that I can do it. So I have that to thank for that experience, and I'm sure I'll be doing business with people in the future and making deals and compromises and signing papers, and I will know now what to do.
Well, that sounds like an incredible experience, and one where you learned an enormous lesson in investing, and that is a prime example of how something that was so stressful to you could have easily brought you or anyone else, down to their knees and going, I'm done. I'm not going to trust anyone. I'm not going into business, and I'm not cut out for this crap. And as I'm listening to this, what probably made it even worse for you, I would imagine, is that you had brought your family into this and that they had trusted you. It's one thing to lose your own money, but to bring family in. And so that must have been really difficult for you as well.
that was by far the most difficult part. And
Mhm.
I knew that I knew that they loved me before, and I was so ashamed, so afraid, but I knew that I had to handle it all directly and face the fire. Just like go to them, because like there's part of me that's like, oh, maybe I can fix this, maybe I can just stay with the company longer, maybe he's right, maybe you can just raise more money. But no, I knew my gut was like, I cannot continue. The money's gone, he already lied. So I'm telling my husband that his parents, and oh, it was awful. But what I got to also learn in that was I experientially got to understand deeply how much they loved me.
Mm.
They stood by me and said, look, we love you and trust you. We would trust you again. And we want you to know that we have your back. And it's okay. In the long term scheme of things, it's not that much money if you really think about it. Like, and to me, I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like right in my face. Like, this is so much money. And it's just like, over your lifetime, how much money you're going to make, it's okay. It hurts,
Mhm.
but we love
Yeah.
you and it's okay. And man, it was a huge, just like, it just fed my soul to know that they loved me regardless.
Wow, that's an inspiring story, and the tips for the listeners was incredible to go out and really do your research, spend that extra money on getting an attorney who can look over things because that extra money can save you a lot of money going
Yes,
down the road, and never give up. And you didn't give up, and you didn't let it burn you down. You just built yourself right back up, and it sounds like that maybe even strengthened the bond that you have with your family,
it did.
from that lesson.
It absolutely did. And one more thing I want to say about that
Sure.
is what I also bring to my current adventure is that I have redefined what it means to fail, because we have this idea that failure is somehow bad when it's actually inevitable. It's just inevitable. We are going to fail if we are going for big dreams. It's just part of the journey of success. And if we can redefine what failure means through our own interpretation, saying, you know what, I'm obviously going to do everything I can to make sure that I don't fail, but instead say I'm going to make sure I can do everything to succeed. But if I fail, I will be okay. It's going to happen. And every time, if I learn something from it, is that really failing? Because we'll never know until we reach the end of our lives looking back if it was actually a failure, or if it led to even more money or more success or that next partnership that brought us to where we were looking to go. So everything, like we teach in emotional intelligence, is an interpretation. So it's really important that we just get it's inevitable, and that maybe it's not even a failure if we learn.
Oh, that is so powerful, and it there's kind of such a fantasy with a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs that, well, the people who've made it, they didn't really stumble along the way. They just made it, and everybody sees that end result of the fancy cars, the vacations, the boats, whatever it might be. Even watching professional poker players who win tens of thousands, millions of dollars on television, and they think, wow, that's awesome. They succeeded. But it was the failure that led up to the success. It's just like at the poker table. People can watch the World Series of Poker
Hmm.
and see these guys and women who making big bucks playing poker, and they think, man, these guys are so successful. They got it made. But they never see all the failure that happened on their journey to actually getting to that point where they have a seat at the final table, and where they're making money, and where they have, the fortunes to be able to kind of live life the way they want. So yeah, I think it's just a misconception that people have, that people who are successful never fail, and they think, well, if I fail once along the way, it wasn't meant to be.
I completely agree with you. And there's also this misconception that people are overnight successes. I know that, I recently interviewed a gentleman named Ed O'Keefe, who has this incredible book called Time Collapsing. And he calls it like this tsunami, but it's like really the rumbles of that wave are just below the surface, and they continue to roll and gain momentum and momentum until they finally become this giant wave of success, or this tsunami. But it's like, how are we putting in that work to build that wave up? And people like Sarah Blakely, the woman who founded this billion-dollar company, Spanx. Everybody likes to say she's an overnight success, but really she had been in the process of this journey for years. And whether it was thinking of ideas or being the kind of person that it would take to be and run in a billion-dollar company, So I really don't believe that there's any overnight successes. I think there's maybe one or two people who get lucky, but I think it's also the same thing in poker. It's like, if someone wins a huge tournament, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be an overnight success. Sure, they'll win a lot of money, but over time you're going to see, are they still successful?
Absolutely. And those are just great examples. And, talking about entrepreneurship and taking risk and failure, when did you realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. And it had a lot to do with the experience of losing all that money, but also really getting to see what it would be like to be an entrepreneur. And having been a professional poker player and knowing what it was like to be my own boss, I sort of knew that I didn't want to go back to a job where I was told what projects to work on, what to do, how to be creative. And so when I thought about the vision I have for my life, the things that are most important to me is that I dictate what I do with my time, and also to have financial freedom. And when I thought about how I saw my life, I saw it, going on vacations and working, or working from wherever I wanted from my laptop, this freedom of being in my pajamas if I wanted to be, but also feeding my future child, and also being able to
Sure.
work and being in partnership with my husband, who he's a professional poker player, and this way that we could work together if we were all both responsible for our own time. And then a second to that was, what does my message to the world, what is it? And how do I best make a difference? And as I was learning to be an emotional intelligence coach, like, sure, I could do one-on-one training, but I really know that my gifts are to create content, because that's what I did as a reporter. That's what I was amazing at. Like, before that, I just was a writer. So like, owning who I am, owning my vision for my life, and then on top of that, owning what I'm good at and what I can do to make a difference with the world. That's when I decided, like, entrepreneurship and going down this path is really the way. So that's when I
That's
decided.
powerful. That's great. And what would you say to some listeners who are out there right now who want to make that initial step, but they're fearful, they're afraid? What kind of advice would you give them?
Everything in our life is everything that we want in our life, like whatever it is, business, relationships, health, what's between what we want and what we have is our ability to risk. Because we talk about our comfort zone, and our comfort zone is really made up of the beliefs that we have about how things should look, the beliefs we have about ourselves, and the beliefs we have about failure and risk. And so what I would say to those people is, first, what is your why? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And what gift or what message or what difference are you going to make with your business to the world? And guided by your vision, guided by your why. And if you don't really understand or know what your why is, I would suggest reading Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's incredible. Or you can watch any of his videos or his TED Talk, which is, I think it's like the single most watched TED Talk of all time. And so grounded by your why are you doing it? What's this for and what's your vision? Then be guided by that, and in those small risks that you take, understand that it's going to be scary, and don't make your fear wrong. Make your fear your friend. Be guided. Like, if you're fearful, you kind of know that's where you need to go. Like, what's that first step? And as you take these small incremental risks, you will see that you're still alive at the end. Like you like ask that person for a podcast interview. Share your business plan with another expert who can give you advice. That might be scary, because you might be exposed to your weaknesses, but exposing yourself is the way to get better. So take those incremental risks and always celebrate them. No matter what risk it is, celebrate them. And that way, in those small movements forward and celebrations moving forward, you are going to subconsciously and consciously transform your relationship with risk and redefine who you are in those moments. But the best thing is to be guided by your why, because that will pull you through and turn that fear into courage.
Wow, I'm such a firm believer in that why question as well, because once people answer that, it really makes themselves more clear on what their journey is. And and you talked about how to embrace your fear, and I think so many people are used to running away when they're fearful. So to embrace it is like a foreign idea and concept. But I love it, because that's what you need to do. You need to face your fear. And I believe we're creatures of habit. We kind of eat the same foods. We go to the same restaurants. We drive the same way to work and to the grocery store and wherever we're going. We're just used to patterns in our behavior and how we live. And anytime that we need to do something different, go a different path, it creates stress, and people get uncomfortable with that. And so that's part of the journey of improving being an entrepreneur and going out of your comfort zone to be successful. Is you have to take those risks. You have to have new behaviors. You have to do something new. And that can be uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I think you gave us some incredible information on that.
Yeah.
Now, just kind of, thinking back to, when you were growing up, what were some of the messages that you received about money and business and finance? Did you ever have a talk with anyone in your family as you were growing up about what you should do with your money, how to save, how to make money, or any of that stuff?
No, not at all. And in fact, my mom, who was, she was adopted from Korea at age 11. And so her scarcity conversation is extremely strong. And I just, I was that way for a long time. I thought that there was never going to be enough, that I didn't know how to make money. And so, that is a great question, because as any entrepreneur proceeds in their path, they will come up against any limiting belief that they've ever had about themselves, including their beliefs about money. So I love this question. And this belief that I don't know how to make money, I'm not an entrepreneur, busting through those is an incredibly confrontive and uncomfortable process, because just like you said, it's going to be doing things that we've never done, being who we've never been. And for me, I get to every day at first, like how I first started shifting this conversation I have around money is just the way that I talk about money, the way that I perceive it. And, there's something that my husband and I do every time we spend a lot of money, whether it's on, my recently I just spent a lot of money on my website that is going to be, released in the next couple months. But like I just say to myself, good thing I'm rich, good thing I know how to make a lot of money. And whether that's true or not, it still shifts my way of being, because if I'm stressed and like beating my head against the wall because I just spent this much money or whatever, that's not going to help either. So shifting those conversations is so important.
Oh yeah, for sure. And since you've been down this entrepreneurial road for a while, you shared an experience that created a lot of turmoil and stress for you, but yet you turned it around and was able to be bigger and better and even have better relationships because of it. But what's a moment that was one of the most fulfilling that stands out to you during your entrepreneurial professional journey?
Well, one of the biggest things that was holding me back from launching my podcast and putting myself out there as a writer and speaker is that it's all on me. Like, if nobody listens, if nobody wants my content, it is because they're listening to me. And so I had a lot of, like I don't have a co-host. I can't like blame it on them, or whatever it is. So that was one of the scariest parts about my decision to move forward with this as a solopreneur. And in the first couple of weeks of launching my podcast, the response and messages I got about sharing my own story, about the way that I'd interviewed and the guests that I had acquired to share with my audience, the feedback blew me away. I have people emailing me, one woman emailed me and said, that episode that you did on emotional intelligence with your mentor, and when you talked about your marriage and the difficulties that you had, you completely inspired me to rekindle my marriage of 30 years to bring passion back into it. And I know that I can do it because of your podcast, and that the depth of the feedback that I've gotten, the realness and rawness of the people who listen has been by far the most fulfilling part of this journey. When people say that, like another email is like, I've struggled with loneliness and depression for a really long time and anxiety, and it's really held me back. But those 3 podcasts about anxiety that you shared in those different ways of thinking about it and steps that I can take has really made a difference in my everyday life. Like, that is my why, and so it's just been an incredible journey of knowing that I can make a difference, and just continues to fuel me.
Yeah, and when people are in that position, when they know that they've impacted someone else's life, that they provided value, that they've improved someone's life some way, in some form, some fashion, that's just an incredible feeling. And it feels better than if someone gave you just $1,000 out of nowhere. I mean, it is amazing to know that people can listen to you and learn from your message and learn from your show and just to improve their lives. I don't think there's a price tag on that feeling.
I absolutely agree. And if I can ever make a difference, and what I want to share is that anybody who is looking to be an entrepreneur, I would invite you to just expand your why if you haven't already, because a path to be successful for one's own purpose or one's own profit it will be in a lonely journey, and it will not be nearly as fulfilling when you get quote unquote there as if you have, like, I really believe that it is every entrepreneur's responsibility to give back, whether that's the way that you treat your employees or it's the way that you run your business within, it's integrity, it's who we get to be. And I really believe that there is not enough of that in this world. There's not enough light, there's not enough people who bring honesty and morals and virtue to their lives and in transactions, in business. Like, I think entrepreneurs can be this leader to change, like literally change the world.
Yeah, I agree. I could not agree more. And Kristy, you've brought so much value to this show, and I'm only imagining that there's going to be people who are going to be inspired by listening to you today. And so we're out of time, but I want you to tell the listeners, how can they contact you and where can they follow you on social media?
Well, my podcast is called WTF Am I Doing With My Life? You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, all the places that podcasts are. And you can search that either by the name or Kristy Arnett, KristyArnett. And that is also the name of my website and where you can search me on any social media site just by typing my name. And I'm sure you'll be able to find me there.
And you have a book that you're currently working on, and the title is?
And the title is WTF Am I Doing With My Life? And it is finding purpose through really taking risks. Like, how do we find purpose in risks and enjoying and falling in love with our life along the way?
Oh, that's incredible. So everyone, be sure to reach out to Kristy so that you can get a copy of her book when it comes out. I can't wait to purchase my own copy. I'm super excited to be able to talk to you today. I appreciate your time, Kristy. It's been amazing. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlaskus.com.